Hey, this is Fit Gear Hunter here with a review of the just announced Polar Vantage V2. And we're gonna get into basically an overview of the watch, highlight of things that are brand new, things that are new to the Vantage series over what is already available on the Grit series. Gonna get into a hands-on, looking at the watch, looking at how the app works in conjunction with the watch and how you see some of these new features. Then we're gonna come back for a summary of what I think about the overall testing and training, as well as comparisons to some of the primary products on the market. So if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and please consider subscribing to the channel. Definitely lots of content, and all of the training, all of the testing, all the reviews is based on using these devices for high intensity interval training, CrossFit, cross training, circuit training, things that use a lot of wrist flex and relate to those things. So what is the size, the basics, the general stats? So it's a 46 millimeter by 15 and a half. I think the website will quote 13 millimeters, but about 15 and a half millimeters thick. 7-day battery life. One thing that's new is that it's an aluminum casing. We're gonna look at it closely in a hands-on in just 1 second. 1.2 inch screen. Buttons are the same as the Vantage V. Touch screen is the same as the Vantage V, 240 by 240 pixel resolution. It does have the optical heart rate sensor that has the new color scheme, as you'll see on the Grit. It has a new watch band system, which has a pull pin, which you can change out for different colors. But that's the overall basics. So it's 52 grams. So it's lighter than the Vantage V was originally by about 14 grams. So what is different? And the screen quality is a little bit clearer. The colorization is a little bit better, like we saw in the Grit X versus the original Vantage series. So what is brand new? Well, brand new, it's got music controls on it, which doesn't mean you can store music, just means you can forward to the next song directly from the watch, and it'll just change the song on your phone. You have a few new watch faces. So basically you look at it just like the same basic template with just some minor alterations. You have a slightly brighter wrist rate. So one of my biggest complaints, and it's still a complaint, is the brightness of the overall screen. It used to be that when you would flip the wrist of the Vantage V, Vantage M, and Grit X, you would get a super dim wrist raised backlight. They've increased it by just a little bit. And the general backlight is the same as the Grit X. It looks like most of the screen tech is the same as the Grit X. It comes in at 27 lumens, which is on the lower end of the spectrum if you compare it to the 945, which comes in at 245 or 145 lumens. So you're looking at about 20% of the brightness of the 945 and about 45% of the brightness of the Phoenix 6, but the resolution is a little bit more blurry. It's a little bit more bluish, a little washed out on the backlights, but the wrist ray is just a hair better. That's coming in at like 6 lumens. So again, as a percentage, that's 10% of the brightness of the Phoenix 6 on the wrist raised backlight. What else do you get? The tests. You can get lots of different testing now. So you had the orthostatic test, which you could choose from orthostatic using a chest strap versus the nightly recharge. So you can still do the orthostatic test. You can still do a fitness test where you lay down and it'll give you a VO2 max score. But now you have a leg recovery test, which is just where you jump 3 times as high as you can, and it'll test or gauge your jumping versus previous jumping if you do it 3 times over a 28-day period. You have a cycling test and a running test. Again, we're focused on CrossFit and high-intensity interval training, so I did not get into the specifics of, and I might do that in a separate video for what the running test is like. You basically run at a certain pace, and it slowly increases your pace, and it gauges how you have performed. Next up is editable widgets. So you can edit what widgets you see when you swipe the screen to go to different functional pieces, and there is a new widget. So basically you have the same basic widgets. We'll look at it in a second, and you can just edit which ones are available to be viewed if you want to turn one of them off. And you get one more extra widget, and that's the training summary widget. So the week of training, you can see a heart rate zone in the simple widget. So how much time you're in the red versus, so like zone 5 of the heart rate gauge, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you can get just sort of a visual snapshot and dive into it, get more specs and details. As well as they've edited the settings that you get when you swipe down from the top, what you can see, adding just a couple of basic functions. What is new on the Vantage V2 versus the Grit X? Well, on the Vantage V2, we're carrying over the fuel wise, which will tell you at different points in a workout based on how you set it up. If you're depleting your fuel resources based on how much carbs and protein you're burning on an exercise when you need to refuel, and you'll see fuel stats for how much you burned in a workout, but mostly just reminders to fuel up. Hill splitter on the runs, just assessing the hills as you run them. Strava live segments, and the weather widget is also on here, like it was on the Grit X. So with all that aside, let's dive into the watch, let's dive into the app, and then come back for a summary. Okay, let's get into the watch just a little bit. We can see that it's 46 millimeters across, 15.5 millimeters thick. The buttons are basically the same as the Vantage V. You get 2 on the left, 3 on the right. The button press is actually pretty good, pretty solid, pretty consistent. You get the Polar Precision Prime heart rate sensors with the new light up LEDs, the same color scheme that was on the Unite, as well as the Grit X. One of the nice things is an aluminum casing, which creates the lightness, why it's only 52 grams. You also have this new mechanism for releasing the watch bands. So you pull the pin and the watch band comes off, making it easier to change out for different color schemes. And I'm sure soon enough there'll be multiple options out there for it. The watch band itself is a good textured feel to it, as well as they put a different color scheme on the back. And how does it compare to the overall, look and feel? So here it is compared to the 945. You can see the brightness differences there, as well as if you wanted to see the brightness differences for the wrist raise gesture, we'll show you that really quickly. And that actually is with the backlight on the Vantage V2. So you can see that it's a very dim backlight when you do the wrist raise gesture compared to the Vantage V. So looking at the different aspects of it, you have these basic widgets that you can swipe through. It is a touch screen, and the touch screen has been working pretty consistently well. This even has a screen protector on it. I'm not noticing any problems, any issues, any delays, not least any sort of felt or significant ones. So you have current heart rate, you have the training log, you've got your nightly recharge, and you can click into any of these and get more stats and details. You got your Fit Spark, which will give you recommended workouts for the day, your weather widget, and this is the new activity widget, which basically will show you how much time you spent in each heart rate zone from your workouts that week, and basic summary. So you can see this is a little bit of a different watch face, as you would see. This is your activity time for the day. So you fill up the bar based on the total activity, and then this is the cardio load widget. So we'll come back to that, but just looking at some of the basics in the new widgets, you can also get to each of them by just clicking the buttons. So we'll use that because it's a little bit more quick and easy. So this is the new activity summary. So it'll give you a week of the summary, the time you spent in each of the zones, different types of workouts you did, and you can look at past weeks. Obviously the weather widget, one of the things I'm having a hard time with is that the watch isn't always staying connected to the phone. So you won't always get an update. This says updated 10/26 because I just updated it right before the, doing this review part. So you'll get predictions of rain, a lot of good actual details. So they've updated a lot of the weather details. So they provide pretty detailed future updates on the hour. So it's gotten actually better. The Fit Spark we've seen in past videos. Nightly recharge, I'll just sort of give you a summary of that. You have your autonomic nervous system recharge and your sleep charge. You can click on either one of these and you can get the details. You can go down below. You'll get all the stats. We'll look at the stats on the phone because it'll be a little bit easier in the app itself. That's the nightly recharge training session. And one of the great features is obviously the load tracking over time. So you'll click into that and it'll give you your bar, your status bar for whether you're productive, overreaching, maintaining, or under training. detraining. And it's always based on your strain, which is the amount of exertion you've put on your body over the last 7 days relative to the average exertion over the last 28 days. So this will build over time, and it'll give you basically a summary of what you've been doing or summary of a recommendation. So anytime it's over 1, you're in that productive to overproductive, overreaching stage. So looking at it on the watch, you can change the widgets now by going into one of the setting pages, and you can turn on or turn off any of these widgets. So this is a new feature where you are allowed to fix any of the widgets for quick scrolling if you don't like a particular one, like heart rate. I just never really seem to go into heart rate. So we'll turn off that widget. We'll go down and save, and then that'll no longer appear. As well as you swipe down from the top, you'll see you have the basics settings. This used to be, you know, all the primary settings, but now you have this plus icon, and you can turn on and turn off a few basic aspects. So a little bit more customization there. Anytime you swipe from the bottom, you'll now see the music, and that'll control the music on your phone only. And then below that, you'll get your notifications. The biggest problem I'm having with the functionality of the notifications is a lot of times there'll be this little tiny picture of the phone with a cross dot red through it right at the top here. That means it's not really connected to the phone. I'm having this like 50% of the time, where 50% of the time I'm not getting notifications. So here's where you see the missing phone. It's not connected now, not getting notifications. And then at some random point, it will connect, and you'll suddenly get a pop-up of a multiple of notifications. So not the best there. Definitely that is super frustrating in addition to the backlight setting. So you can run a multiple of new tests now. Here you can see the orthostatic test is with the H10 or heart rate chest strap. You run a test and it'll tell you your recovery level. One of the nice features is that you can now run an orthostatic test and keep the nightly recharge. So your latest results, your cardio system is not fully recovered, and you can see the details of those. So you gotta do 3 of those on 3 separate days in the last 28 days to be able to get this actual summary of your recovery. But they used to have it to where you couldn't really get the orthostatic test to give you a result for recovery if you are using nightly recharge, and that's now better. So the leg recovery test, you basically go in and it gives you a how-to, latest result, but basically you're gonna jump 3 times, and it'll show you not enough data because I haven't done it 3 times in the last week. I don't know how much this is gonna actually flow into useful information, but you can at least get some gauge of whether your legs are recovered. Cycling test and running test are basically gonna amp up the speed at which you're cycling or running to be able to gauge your fitness. And then the fitness test is basically you lay down, you start the test, and you'll get a result for your VO2 max, so 47. So that's somewhat on par with what I've been getting at a 48, 49 on the Garmin system. So surprisingly, while laying down, you can get an actually accurate fitness test. When you see the workouts, so you go into start a training session, you click into it, and what you're gonna get as far as stats go, you'll see all the same stats that we used to see. So heart rate monitor, duration, calories, and you can click up and click down to get different pages. You now have this music page where you can change different aspects of the music you're listening to straight from the watch, time, heart rate gauge, and back to the main center. So you always still click it by hitting the bottom left, and we'll close it out without saving. And then when you get done with the workout, you'll go in, you'll see all the basic stats you would want to see. I mean, if you're a runner, you're going to get a lot more stats. So here, just looking at yesterday's workout, it'll give you a summary of all the details. Heart rate average, cardio load, and then this is the new energy consumption. So this ties into fuel-wise when you need to plan your workouts for re-gauging or re-energizing and taking in a fuel sack, and because of the calories and protein you burned in that workout in particular. But the main thing, just on a basic, if you're doing high-intensity interval training or CrossFit training, I'll typically use the high-intensity interval training profile. You'll just get the simple summary of stats, the most important one being the cardio load. You're not getting recovery time in the workout stats, although there is a trick that I'll go over in a second. So that's what it looks like when you get done with the workout. So what you see in the workout, what you see after the workout from the stats go, and then you can obviously from that go into your training load to see how that affected your load at that point in time, to see how you're doing in your accumulation or exertion level of workouts over time. So looking at the app, so getting into that, this is the basic landing page. So you'll see your activity, your summary of details from the day, your sleep widget, sleep aspects. It gives you a bunch of good aspects: sleep amount, solidity, continuity, actual sleep, REM sleep, and deep sleep. And then your nightly recharge, which is a combination of your sleep score, which is a 78 for last night and compared to the average, your autonomic nervous system charge. Now this is a 4-hour window. Typically an hour after you've fallen asleep, it'll track more in-depth stats. Now it tracks it throughout the whole time, but it's only comparing that 4 hours to the average or the baseline amount over the last 28 days. So beat to beat interval times, heart rate variability, and breathing rate. So Polar does a great job at combining all of these stats and details along with your sleep score to give you a recharge for the night. Whether you are ready to hit the next workout hard or whether you're compromised, needing to, so you can see I've got some compromised in here. Sleep was not as good, compromised, really good, and it'll give you little tips for the day for how you should approach your workout from there. So you get into the training log, and there's a few things you're going to find in the training log. Obviously, this is a summary of all your details for the week, and this now is a widget, so you can see how much time you spent in different parts of different zones. So it said yesterday I was overtraining. It's still saying now in this label here that I'm overtraining. Here's where you also see the tests. So I had to take it 3 times. That was the second test. And so now I go into the third test, and it's just basically telling me in simple terms, your cardio system isn't fully recovered. It's not telling me a countdown though. It's not giving me a clock to say, okay, you have, estimated this much time to recover. And then counter movement jump test is just basically showing you the jump statistics for that particular test result. And the fitness test is just giving you the range for where you sit in the VO2 max spectrum. But those where the tests land, they land in your training page overall. If you look at the stats you get, this is going to be a little bit different. And I'm going to share how it compares optical heart rate sensor versus a chest strap. So this is actually a summary using a chest strap linked to Polar Beat. And what is interesting is you get a recovery time. If you have a chest strap and you're just tracking your workout through the Polar Beat app, you're actually going to get recovery time when it flows from Polar Beat up through the internet back down to Polar Flow, and the stats appear here. That's where your cardio load will appear, as well as just the general specifics. So if we look at how, here's just more of the analysis of how does the optical heart rate sensor hold up. So here it is off of a chest strap, 140 beats per minute average, and the cardio load at 98. Relative to the actual watch, 139 beats, so 140 versus 139, so it's pretty spot on, 91 versus 98. The most important thing is this cardio load, because this will affect your load over a time, whether you're overtraining or undertraining, that sort of thing. So it being 91 versus 98, that's 92% accurate. If you go to look at how the chart looks, so you have the heart rate chart. This is with the chest strap over time, and this was a partner WOD with basically, you go, I go, and at the end, it was a lot of abs. So the abs were burning out, and the heart rate was somewhat recovering in that period of time for these 3 intervals. It caught it somewhat, so you see the general flow of things. Obviously, it's not 100% perfect, but if you look at just the amount of time it's showing, this is the actual chest strap, 654 in the red, which is the most important because that'll strain your body the most, and that's what flows into your cardio load for the workout, versus 553. So 654 is 553. So that's, 80% or so of catching the upper aspects. So if you go into the next workout, this, you can see 148 beats per minute average, cardio load score of 114 versus the actual watch itself, 143. So 143 versus 148. and 104 versus 114. That's 91% accurate for the load. So that's coming in actually incredibly well. If you look at the workout itself, it was a clean complex every 2 minutes on the minute for the first 6, and then some snatch work, and then a 5-minute AMRAP with a 3-minute rest. 5-minute AMRAP, 3-minute rest. So that's what it looks like on a clean chest strap. And you can see it caught, it caught the AMRAPs relatively okay, and it caught some of the lifting complex, the clean complex, every 2 minutes on the minute, somewhat okay. But all in all, again, 1430 in the red off the chest strap, 1407 in the red off of the watch. This is incredibly good compared to other devices I've tested. And it's ironic because I've even tested this same, the Polar Precision Prime with the updated LED lights on other devices, and it has not been as accurate. So I'm going to continue to do a little more work on that to see if the accuracy holds up long term. So once you've done your workouts, so there are the workouts again there, just a slight, short running test. You go in, you can hit this cardio load section to get to your load over time. Now you can look at it with, the phone in vertical, and it'll show you that you put in this much load. Now what it calculates is, see, the strain is the amount of cardio load on average over the last 7 days. The tolerance is how much your body can handle. So I was testing different devices, so my tolerance fell off a little bit on the Polar system, my load over time. But you can see it as well in a really visually useful graph. So you can see just the periods of time where I was particularly testing Polar devices, but you can see it. The purple line is your cardio load for the last 7 days, and the blue line is your fitness level. So you can really track the development of your fitness level, obviously as it estimates and uses stats based on the Polar system and analytics, but it's a really useful. So any of these little red ones, you can see when you had high strain days, like a seriously more higher level exertion workout. But you can see how it pulls up the 7-day load, accumulation, as well as how it over time pulls up your fitness level. It pulls it up over time. So it's just incredibly useful visual graph where you can see how you're developing your fitness as you're building that tolerance score, that blue line. That's where it shows you're building and amassing sort of higher level fitness. So that's the basics for how you see the load over time. So again, you have your generic activity. This activity bar is actually kind of useful because it goes up with workouts as well. Your sleep, your nightly recharge, which is probably the main landing page you want to go to, and your training over time. The Polar's got a really good training development system, and it's a relatively simple app which gives you all the stats you would need without complicating it too much. So let's go back and talk again about what I think in review. Okay, so what do I think in summary, and how does it compare to some of the other devices that are out there? I'm probably going to do a separate video on how the Polar Vantage V2 compares to the Garmin 945, just because at the top end, it's good to know just the primary comparison, but I'll also give you just sort of a summary comparison to the Suunto 9 and the Chorus line of watches. So in summary, just looking at the watch, I love the casing. I love the style. I love the weight. Obviously, it's lighter at 52 grams because they're using aluminum casing. I just love the sleek style of it, the button presses. Everything's working great. I love Polar's visualization of load tracking over time. Awesome, awesome screen where you can swipe back and forth to see your load trend over time, as well as how it is building your visual fitness growth. The heart rate accuracy on here has been actually pretty accurate. We always want to connect to a chest strap. We always want to have a chest strap to get truly accurate, because the accuracy of the heart rate determines the accuracy of the workout exertion, which determines the impact, the recovery time, the load, all of those types of things. And I've also liked that the battery's good. I know it's silly, but it's getting about 5.8 days of battery life, which compared to the 7, they say on the website, I think that's pretty spot on. That's usually on the longer end. I'm usually getting a little less with active use of a watch than the stated value. What do I feel sort of about this, some of the new additions? So the watch faces, they're okay, a little bit of a change. The widgets, that you can turn widgets on and you can turn them off, that's okay. The music controls, that's okay. That's all right. The settings edit, you can edit the things when you swipe down, the things you can see up there, that's okay. The test, I feel like the testing that they're evolving, I think it's great that they're evolving these different tests. I'm probably going to do the running test, even though I'm not a runner, just to see what it's like. But the leg recovery test, I think that's okay. I'm going to have to track that over a long period of time, so maybe that'll be a future longer review. But the orthostatic and nightly recharge have always been there, and those are helpful and useful tools. So, you know, the sleep tracking, obviously the recovery of the sleep tracking and how that ties in, love those aspects. I love the nightly recharge aspects that you get from the sleep study, sleep score, and recovery side. What do I feel like is a struggle? The notification issue. I mean, I'm getting 50% or less of my notifications because it's constantly not connected. How does that relate to other things? Well, the weather won't update. As we saw in the video, we're still looking at yesterday's weather, so it's not auto-updating over time. The backlight drives me crazy because I obviously am comparing it to what I've seen in Coros and the Apex Pro and the Vertix and Suunto on the Baro 9 and 945 Phoenix 6 on the Garmin line. And across all of these, this is the hardest to read. It's the hardest to pick out. Number one, because the wrist raised backlight is just super dim relative to a regular backlight. Number two, even when you go down, you manually push a button, which is annoying. You still don't get like the greatest brilliance, but you obviously have had to take an extra step to try to figure out what the screen is telling you. Super annoying. There should be control. It should not have one level of backlight for wrist raise and one for otherwise. And then the recovery time. It's a minor point, but as we saw in the video, you could get recovery time. I mean, we're just doing a chest strap tracking on the Polar Beat and flowing through to, you know, to the Polar Flow app, and it's got recovery time, and it's actually getting more accurate, or somehow it's more accurate in what was getting recovery time. So those things need to improve. I continually am frustrated because of the screen quality, because again, we use these watches 23 out of the 24 hours in a day or somewhere in that range. So the visual screen quality needs to be on point and the notifications need to be on point. Can't have lags there. That makes this a real struggle for me. So how does it compare to the Suunto 9? Well, the Suunto 9 has body battery resources, heart rate variability tracking all day. It will give you, you know, the recovery time, like a true hardcore recovery time between workouts, and it'll obviously show you the workout impact, as will the Vantage V2. The downside of the Suunto Baro 9, or Suunto 9, I should say, is that there's not real load tracking. They're just tracking how many minutes you worked out this week, whereas Polar is doing an awesome job. So what does Polar Vantage V do better than the Suunto 9? Well, it's got better sleep tracking across the board, better load tracking. What other ways that it sort of falls short? Well, it's obviously the backlight issue, not tracking daily stress levels. So that's a unique feature that Suunto offers on the 9. The customization is not as good. The display experience is not as good as far as like watch faces, things like that. Obviously, the recovery time is non-existent really in some ways if you're just using the Vantage V2, and notifications are spotty. So how does it compare to the Coros line of watches? I'd probably compare it to the Apex Pro, not the Vertix. But compared to the Apex Pro, what does the Apex Pro have over the Vantage V2? Well, you got a sapphire screen and titanium bezel. Those are kind of nice qualities. You can connect to Ant Plus chest straps and other foot pods and things like that. You have a million times longer battery life. You do have accurate recovery time in the Coros ecosystem. You have pulse ox. Now, I've said in separate views for the Vertix and Apex Pro, the pulse ox I don't find very useful because it's just sort of a spot on check unless you're over a certain altitude. So it's not giving you insight into your sleep. And you do have good watch faces, but you do have, so it does have pulse ox, and you do have good watch faces on the Coros system. They both do running power. They both do workout intensity. But what does the Vantage V2 do better? It does sleep tracking better, like a million times better. Coros is super bland at this point when this video comes out. Recovery tracking as far as like your overall wellness, so the nightly recharge recovery, and then load tracking over time. I found the Coros system, you'd be like, you worked out, you didn't work out today. You worked out the next day, you worked out. So it's not like a building of a mountain of how much workout you're putting in for the load. And then lastly, how does it compare to the 945? I'll probably leave some of this out because I think you probably want to see this in a hands-on, but the 945 has music, has brilliance on the screen, has full customization widgets, body battery heart rate variability tracking, full useful pulse ox, respiration tracking, The only minor things, and then, you know, a litany of other things, the minor things that the Polar Vantage V2 does better or similar, but just a little bit better, is the visualization of your training load over time. It's just got a little more simplistic, just better visually than the Garmin system. And the summary of the night. So the 945 should be updating to higher level sleep analytics from First Beat to get a sleep score. And that's great, but the nightly insight into a bunch of different variables is much better on the Polar system. So we'll get into another video, but overall, you know, as far as a functional watch for high intensity interval training and CrossFit tracking, yes, it's a thumbs up as far as functional there. As far as like a functional watch alongside your training, I feel like there's definitely still room to grow, because for me, the backlight is a big miss, and the notification issue is an alternately very significant miss for me. So that's it. Fit Gear Hunter, please give it a thumbs up, continue subscribing, and we'll see you soon.